Everybody. And it looks like we have quorum, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first thing is I will read this. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka Lakes website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. Thank you very much. And before we start, Rachel, would you like to do the spiel before I start?
Hi. Yeah, I believe that we have to adopt the agenda first.
Okay. Moved by Member Creaser, second by Member Grogan Green. Be it resolved that Committee of Adjustment agenda dated January 17th, 2022 be adopted. All those in favor? That is carried. Are there any declarations of interest? And I am just going to say the Mazan application I will not take part in, as I sit on council with Councilor Mazan, and I don't think it would be fair to sit in on that. Thank you. How would you like to do it?
Sorry, and then just we need to adopt the minutes and then I can go.
Okay. New year, have to retrain me. Moved by Member Quinn, second by Member Grogan Green. Be it resolved that the minutes dated December 13th, 2021 be adopted and approved as circulated. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Okay. Now would you like to start?
Yes, through you. Thank you, Chair Edwards. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is required that I make a few statements, and then I will explain the procedures of the hearing. This electronic hearing is being held in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The members of the Committee of Adjustment present are Chair Alan Edwards, members Joe Quinn, Lisa Grogan Green, Rob Bosomworth, and Sharon Creaser. I confirm we have a quorum. The members of Township staff present are Derek Hammond, CAO, David Pink, Director of Development Services and Environmental Sustainability, Bryce Sharp, Manager of Planning, Caitlin Walker, Planner 1, Sam Soya, Planner 2, Lauren Cochran, Planning Services Assistant, Elizabeth Markle, Planning Clerk, and myself, Rachel Mulholland, Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. Please note that Kristen Darling, Planner 1, will not be attending today's hearing. Sam Soya, Planner 2, and Caitlin Walker, Planner 1, will be introducing the Preston, Carusi, Cavusi, and Grandin Wright applications. Public input on this January 17th, 2022 agenda was invited at the following email address, planning@muskokalakes.ca. It should be noted that the motions have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite the meeting. When it is time to vote, members shall physically raise their hand until the chair has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded. This is not considered a recorded vote. Now I will explain the hearing process. The planner will provide an explanation and purpose of the application. The date notice was circulated and will present any submissions received. The planner will also provide the planning staff's comments. Committee will then hear from the applicant or the applicant's agent if they wish to add any information or to substantiate their proposal. Please provide your name, mailing address, and postal code for our records. Committee will hear from those in support of the application and those in opposition to the application. Again, please provide your name, mailing address, and postal code for our records. If you are here to speak on an application, please wait to raise your hand in Zoom until the planner presents the relevant application. Committee will then hear the applicant or the applicant's agent respond to any questions or concerns raised. Committee will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant and/or staff. Committee will debate the application and make a decision based on the information presented at the hearing. Please note that the effect of written and oral submissions on decisions of applications for consent and minor variances and the reasons for minor variances decisions as both required under the Planning Act will be pre-populated with standard wording. However, committee may decide to add reasons and/or effects to the standard wording after voting on a decision. It must be noted that the chair has a vote on each application and can participate in the discussion. There is a 20-day appeal period from the date of the decision. In the case of a minor variance application, a building permit is not available until after the appeal period and no appeals are received. When you are present at the hearing, please provide us your name and mailing address. Any presentation is limited to 5 minutes unless otherwise permitted by the committee. Please note the resolutions are automatically written in the positive to assist in completing decisions as opposed to writing out each resolution. This does not in any way mean an application is going to be approved. And one last thing, please take down the pink notice signs that were posted on your property to advertise today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mulholland. And the first application is B10921ML. Neylan. And that'll be Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chair Edwards, and good morning, members of committee. Today's first application to be heard is consent application B10921ML in the name of Neylan. The subject lands are located at 1033 Ross Clare Road, unit number 30. I direct committee's attention to the submitted sketches starting on page 35 of the agenda package. The purpose of the application is to sever a 440 square foot portion of the subject lot and add it to the abutting lot to the east. This proposed lot addition is a boundary adjustment that will have the effect of correcting the encroachment of the benefiting lot's driveway. No new lots are being created through this application and no redevelopment is proposed at this time. Notice of this public hearing was circulated 26 days in advance of the meeting in accordance with the Planning Act, and 4 comments have been received. These were received from the Township's Development Services and Public Works Departments and also from the District Municipality of Muskoka. And all comments have advised of no concerns with this application. No submissions from members of the public have been received. I have prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration, and staff would not object to the application subject to standard conditions for consent applications that involve such a boundary adjustment. I have no further comments at this time, but I would be happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawyer. Is the applicant or applicant's agent here wishing to speak on this?
They're both here and they're in.
Okay, we could bring them in. I guess the agent would like to speak first.
Hi, it's Paul Elia here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Do you have any questions for me?
I don't. Does anyone else have any questions? No, it doesn't look like there is. If the applicant would like to speak, they're more than welcome to, or if you'd like to explain it, but I think it's fairly straightforward.
Yes, this property, Mike Neylan's property extended onto my driveway, which means I cannot theoretically drive on my driveway. So this is just clearing that up, that little issue.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, are there any questions from the members? Seeing none. A minute here, I gotta find it. Oh, here it is at the bottom. Okay, sorry about that. Moved by member Quinn, second by member Creaser, be it resolved that consent be granted for application B 10921 ML Neylan, provided the following conditions are fulfilled. One, a registrable description deed of the severed lot and any required right-of-way be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer along with a registered copy of the reference plan. Two, that a legal undertaking be submitted in order to confirm that the severed lot will merge in title to the lot is being added upon registration of the transfers/deeds, which may include breaking consent. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is carried.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And the next application is B 11121 ML Brandon Wright. And who's going to look after that one?
I'll be taking that one, Chair Edwards.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair Edwards. The next application to be heard is consent application B/111/21 ML in the name of Brandon Wright. The subject property does not have an assigned municipal address. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted consent sketch starting on page 52 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicant proposes to create one additional lot. No development is proposed on either lots at this time, and they are both currently vacant. Notice of this public hearing under the Planning Act was circulated 26 days in advance, and 4 submissions have been received to date. The first submission is by Tim Sopko, the Township's Public Works Technician. The Public Works Department has no objections. The second submission is by Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official. The Development Services Department has no objections. The third submission is by Sandy Boss, Building Inspector. He has no concerns with the application. The fourth submission is by Curtis Servret, the District Municipality of Muskoka's planner, and has advised that they would not be opposed to the application as long as the proper development control techniques were used to conserve conifer thermal cover, deer feeding areas, and movement corridors. Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration. Staff have recommended the standard conditions of consent. 1, that a registral description of the severed lot and any required right-of-way be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer along with a registered copy of the reference plan. 2, that a consent agreement with the Township under Section 5126 of the Planning Act be entered into, wherein the applicant agrees not to utilize public parking and docking facilities as the principal means of access to the retained and severed lots, and agrees that adequate long-term parking and docking facilities utilized to access the newly created lot satisfactory to the township shall be secured at all times. This agreement is to be registered on title. 3, that documentation satisfactory to the township securing long-term mainland parking and docking facilities to access the newly created vacant lots be provided. And 4, that cash in lieu of parkland be dedicated to the township in the amount of 5% of the assessed value of the newly created vacant lot or the entire lands, whichever is less. Staff have no further comments at this time, but are happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. And I believe we have the applicant and the applicant's agent here today. Would you like to bring them in, please? Thank you.
Yes, good morning, Chair Edwards. I'm not sure if you're waiting for me or not.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
okay. There's always a little pause there, so before I come on. So Steve Honor, Northern Vision Planning Limited. 109 Meadow Heights Drive, Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L1A4. I'm here representing Doug Grand and Virginia and Tom Wright, owners of the subject lands. They're looking to create this lot for estate planning purposes. I would like to thank Kristen for going out on a really cold day out to the property, and appreciate her staff report. And my clients have no objections to the conditions. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I can get through that fairly quickly, I believe. Yeah, go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, the proposed new lot is 365 feet of frontage and 2.3 acres, and this exceeds the requirement for the official plan and zoning bylaw. The retained lot is in fact larger than that. It's about 550 feet of frontage. Next. This is the old plan. We're looking at the lots that are part 12 in the southeast corner is the point, and we're looking at the lands that are described there as part 8, part 9, and part 10. Just so that you know, part 9 is when this was originally laid out in the 1970s by Bill Grand, who is the father of Doug and Virginia. He wanted to have a walking path from one end of the island to the other. So that's what that part 9 is. Next. So we have the proposed severance sketch here, and you can see the sizes of the lots there is outlined. I know the areas may not be as clear, but again, they meet the OP and zoning bylaw requirements. Next. So in terms of the site itself, this is the frontage of the proposed severed lot. So it is heavily treed. It is as noted in the district comments, a deer wintering area. So there's a fair amount of conifer cover. Next. And this is just a bit of a close-up. Next. And this is on land, and you can see there are some slopes on the proposed severed lot, but nothing that can't be overcome. These I would consider are sort of moderate slopes. They're not overly steep. Next. And another shot of the slope, if you will. Next. And this is an area at the top or about the middle of the lot, and very flat, and easily can be a building site. This is just one of a number of building sites on the lot. Next. And this is the frontage of the proposed retained lot, and you can see the abutting lot to the northwest with the boathouse that's there. Again, heavily treed frontage. Next. And this is on site. The slopes are, there's really next to no slopes on the proposed retained lot. It's quite level. There's a slight slope to the water, which is again typical in the area. Next. And this is a possible building site in the middle of that lot. Again, it's quite level. Next. This is looking through to the, there is a very small frontage, about 85 feet on the southwest side of the property. This is looking through to that. And you can see the property stake. This is right along the property line at the western edge of the retained lot. Next. And this is just taken from the water, and that small frontage is like directly in the middle of this photograph. Next. So in terms of the PPS, again, it does allow for this type of development, and it must be compatible with the rural landscape, which this would be. Next. And in terms of the lot sizes, they do meet the OP requirements, and Lake Muskoka is not sensitive to phosphorus or is over threshold. So there is development potential on Lake Muskoka. Next. And the zoning is there, and certainly the property sizes exceed that, and the lots are quite developable. There is definitely quite a bit of level land on these lots. Next. It is a water access lot. Currently accesses through Beaumaris Yacht Club. There will be a future letter agreement coming from either the Yacht Club or Walker's Point Marina. I think in both cases, these properties, committee may be aware, but they're both looking at expanding their parking for water access properties. Next. So in conclusion, it's my opinion it's consistent with the PPS and conforms to the official plans. And there's further supported items that are there. There's really no development constraints. The lot sizes are compatible with those in the area. Next. And site plan control will be imposed and already is because of the -7, and it is a water access lot, and we certainly know what we have to do to satisfy the township's requirements. So those are all my comments, and I'm certainly here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fawner. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this application? No. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application?
No.
Okay. Are there questions from the members? No questions? Okay. Moved by member Grogan Green, second by member Bosworth. Be it resolved that consent be granted for application B 111-21 ML Grand and Wright, provided all the conditions are fulfilled. 1, a registrable description deed of the severed lot and any required right of way be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer along with the registered copy of the reference plan. 2, that a consent agreement with the township under section 5126 of the Planning Act be entered into wherein the applicant agrees not to utilize public parking and docking facilities as the principal means of access to the retained and severed lots, and agrees that adequate long-term parking and docking facilities utilized to access the newly created lot satisfactory to the township be secured at all times. This agreement is to be registered on title. 3, that documentation satisfactory to the township securing long-term mainland parking and docking to access the newly created lot be provided. 4, that cash in lieu of parkland be dedicated to the township in the amount of 5% of the assessed value of the newly created lot for the entire lands, whichever is less. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. And then we go on to hearing of minor variances. In the first application, I am going to turn over to the Mr. Bosworth, and I will put my screen off. Thank you.
So the next file is A75/21 Mazan property. So, and Mr. Soya, if you could walk us through that one.
Thank you, Member Bosworth. The next application to be heard is minor variance application A7521 in the name of Mazan. The subject lands are located at 1121 Scarcliffe Road, unit number 16C. I direct committee's attention to the submitted sketches starting on page 73 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of this application is summarized as follows. The applicant proposes to recognize a one-story building as a dwelling. The township's comprehensive zoning bylaw requires a dwelling to have a minimum gross floor area of 750 square feet. In this case, it is proposed that a building which has been relocated on the subject property from the neighboring property be recognized as a dwelling with a gross floor area of only 363 square feet, and therefore a 387 square foot variance is requested. The applicants also proposed to demolish an existing two-story boathouse along with the associated dock and construct a new two-story boathouse with an associated dock. And also with a sleeping cabin in the upper level of the boathouse. Given that the new boathouse is to have a different footprint in a slightly different location, the proposal does not qualify as a reconstruction of a legal non-compliant building, and therefore relief from the bylaw is required. In accordance with the zoning bylaw, the maximum permitted floor area of a sleeping cabin is 650 square feet. Similarly, the maximum permitted size of the second story of a boathouse on a lot with 300 feet of frontage is also 650 square feet. In this case, the second story of the existing boathouse has a size of 1,042 square feet, and the proposed sleeping cabin in the second story of the proposed boathouse has a size of 935 square feet. While this, the new boathouse and sleeping cabin represent a reduction in size of the second story, the second story will still be larger than the permitted size of 650 square feet, and therefore variances of 285 square feet are requested to permit the second story sleeping cabin. Also, the maximum permitted length of the second story of a boathouse is 35 feet. This is measured as a projection from the shore, perpendicular from the high water mark. In this case, a second story length of 39 feet is proposed, and a variance of 4 feet is therefore requested. Just over the weekend, the applicant's agent sent me an email to point out that at the time this property was severed in 2017, the habitable space in the second story of the existing boathouse included a kitchen and was therefore identified as a dwelling. Now that this boathouse is to be demolished and a new boathouse is to be constructed, the second story do not contain a kitchen and would therefore be considered a sleeping cabin. So this change from a dwelling in the boathouse to a sleeping cabin can be considered as an improvement from a planning perspective, along with an improvement to the side yard setback and also a reduction in the size of the second story of the boathouse. Notice of this public hearing was circulated 12 days in advance of today's meeting in accordance with the Planning Act, and 2 comments have been received to date. The first submission is by Public Works Technician Tim Sopko, advising that the Public Works Department does not have any concerns. The second submission is by Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official, advising that a building permit will be required to appropriately position the undersized dwelling on the property. Also, an inspection of the existing septic system will be required as part of the building permit application process for both the proposed boathouse and the proposed dwelling to ensure the system can support both the boathouse and the dwelling. No submissions from members of the public have been received. Staff have prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration and have recommended that the application be approved. I have no further comments at this time, but I would be happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soya. Is the applicant and or the applicant's agent present? Would they like to say anything? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Thank you. My name is Terry Martino. I'm an architect with Grandview Architect and Associates. Reside at 341 Kerr Street in Oakville, L6K 3B7. We are the agents for the owner of Mr. and Mrs. Mazan. I would like to thank Mr. Sawyer for his presentation. I would also briefly like to add some additional information for the committee about the proposal. The property was created, as mentioned, by severance in 2017. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Mazan, own subject property and the adjacent property to the east. The property presently has an existing 2-story boathouse with 1,045 square feet of living space above it. The structure is considered a dwelling by planning staff, and it was identified as such at the severance application in 2017. The proposal today is a product of a long and thoughtful design process. That is to say, my clients considered reconstructing the boathouse exactly the way that it was, which would have been their right under a non-conforming use. The intent of the proposal is to reconstruct the new boathouse and create a sleeping cabin above it and to construct a new dwelling on the property. So that is to say the boathouse would now become a 2-story boathouse with a proper sleeping cabin above it and a dwelling unit on the lot, which presently doesn't exist. The new boathouse would conform with respect to all of the zoning requirements, respect to setback on the west side, obviously on the east side, width and height. It actually, the boathouse, single-story portion of the boathouse on the west side of the lot exceeds the provision of the zoning bylaw of 30-foot setback, and it is setback 37, as shown on the site plan drawing. Two variances sought today have to do with the second floor area. We are reducing the area from the existing 1,045 square feet to 935 square feet. As mentioned, there will be no cooking facilities in it, making it a sleeping cabin. The design of the boathouse itself, first of all, I'd like to point out that is used for the sheltering of boats only. Large motorized boats have access directly in from the lake. There is a small access door on the west side, which is intended for the storage of paddle boats, canoes, and similar watercraft. Due to the water depth, there is a sliding rock shelf that comes into the water at that point, and the water depth is insufficient for the docking or the navigation of any motorized watercraft. The boathouse was designed with second floor deck and windows purposely facing the east side, which is the adjacent property that my clients own. It is also slightly tilted from the existing location of the boathouse right now towards the east. It is also brought further back in to the shoreline, reducing the present length of the boathouse, which is 44. We will be at 39. It is built in the original footprint closely to the existing, which is great for the existing property in terms of the land. There will be no requirement to remove any additional vegetation from the shoreline, and it is on the lake bed, which currently where the existing boathouse sits right now. The boathouse will comply obviously with all of the dark sky policy and shoreline buffer policies. We see that the main benefit for the township dwelling use, which is not permitted presently, will be removed, and it will be replaced with smaller sleeping cabin, more in conformance with the zoning bylaws. The boathouse second story proposed is 37 feet, as I mentioned, from the edge of the western setback, and has a 5.5 reduction from the present length of the boathouse. The other variance which is requested is to permit the underside cottage to be constructed. My clients wish to reuse a building which was presently on the eastern property and situate it on the subject property and use it as the principal dwelling. In summary, I believe and concur with the staff report the variance meet for test planning act for a minor variance. The proposal meets the intent of the official plan. Further, it follows the intent of the official plan in seeking improvements during the redevelopment of non-complying buildings and structures. And that is to say that now it is a sleeping cabin, and the lot is now generally more in conformance that it has a principal residence as well as a sleeping cabin on the water, and not the dwelling unit which is on the water presently. It meets the general intent of the zoning bylaw, closer into conformity. It is desirable development, traditional boathouse and cottage on the property. I believe it's sensitively designed in terms of turning its focus towards the adjacent property, which my clients own, has an increased setback, and there's no loss of vegetation in the shoreline. Finally, we believe that it's minor in nature is that the 4-foot additional distance from the shoreline, one of the variances we're asking for, is actually brought back from the existing, and the 935 square feet is a reduction of over 100 square feet of the existing floor area. It's interesting and noted in the staff report that because of the bay, the actual shoreline frontage, the assessed shoreline frontage, is more in the neighborhood of 528 feet, which in normal cases would perhaps present an opportunity for a larger construction. I thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Does the applicant want to say anything? Is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone wishing to speak against this application? And do we have questions or comments from the members? None? Mr.
Yeah.
Quinn?
Yeah, I think this is a beautiful historic property. I think that the planning, I think the drawings and everything are beautiful and make it look like it's old stature, and it's coming more in line with the official plan and the bylaws. So I'll be totally supporting this.
Any other questions or comments from the members? If I could just ask one of Mr. Soya. In your report, you say you don't object to it, but you do question if the small size of the dwelling and the oversize of the sleeping cabin may cause the function more as the other. I wonder if you could expand on that comment and what the implications are.
Through Member Bosworth. Yes, I can definitely do that. It was mentioned in the report as it is a consideration. Looking at what is proposed on this property, it is somewhat unique in that the dwelling would be a building that has the size that would compare to what we would often see as a sleeping cabin. And the sleeping cabin would be the larger habitable space in the second story of the boathouse, which like I say is unique, and it would it sort of sets up a situation where the more intensive use could be in that second story. From a planning perspective, we did consider that. However, it should also be considered that a much larger dwelling could be constructed on this property as of right, based on the lot coverage, the size of the property, and the fact that the lot coverage is still quite significantly less than what the maximum permitted lot coverage on the property would be. And to add to that is also the agents, as the agent has pointed out, that when the lot was severed, that that second story of the existing boat was considered as a dwelling. And so in this case, that would be changing it to a sleeping cabin, which apart from the sizes, does bring the uses more into compliance with the zoning bylaw. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Member Quinn?
Yeah, I also and I also think that there's a good chance that the new principal residence on shore might qualify to be built at a grandfathered setback of 50 feet, because right now the principal dwelling's at 0 feet and they're going to 66. So I believe that I have to support this the way it sits.
The agent, Terry?
Yes, so thank you, member. I guess if I could answer your question, or attempt to answer your question, is that the relocated dwelling, which we propose to be the principal dwelling on the lot, is actually of an historical nature. It was on the property originally, and my clients have, in fact, spent a great amount of time and effort maintaining it. And that is the idea of moving it to the other lot. It may be extended in the future, but the idea is that it is an extremely small footprint. It has the character and historically was on the property for many years. We would like to keep that. We believe that it's very small and obviously can fit into the land without the removal of any vegetation. And the setback that's presently shown on the drawing, its intended location is 70 feet back from the shoreline. So in that way, we believe that it's sort of very light on the land and promotes the kind of historical nature of the property. The two lots are owned by my client and used as such.
Thank you. Member Creaser, you have your hand up.
Sorry.
Uh,
Yeah, I wanted to, the drawing we have of the so-called sleeping cabin above the boathouse shows a full dwelling unit with kitchen. So what are you telling me, that there are revised drawings now for the application? Because I'm just looking at something that shows a kitchen up there, and I find that this application feels a bit like a manipulation in saying that the smaller unit is not a sleeping cabin and a dwelling unit, and that the one over the boathouse is a sleeping cabin and not a dwelling. It just feels like we're just doing this to get it through. I'm not really comfortable with it. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Sharp.
Thank you, Chair Bosworth. Sorry, I'm just going to wait for Chair Edwards to lower his volume. Thank you. Yeah, so a bit of a two-parter here. I just wanted to bring to your attention that there's an individual in the audience who I believe may wish to speak in opposition or support. I'm not sure, but it would be up to you if you want to hear from that individual. It looks like he has his hand up. And then just in response to Member Creaser's question or comment, I would note that the second story floor plan does indicate a sink, a fridge, and a dishwasher. There's nothing in the bylaw that would prevent those types of appliances to be located in the second story of a two-story boathouse and a sleeping cabin. It's mainly a stovetop that's not permitted, and that's a key distinction between a sleeping cabin and a dwelling. No stovetop is shown, and of course a building permit will be required if this is approved, and a permit would not be available if in fact it's intended to be a dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. I did call for anybody else asking if they wanted to speak, and I didn't. Was that did we miss Douglas? I think it's probably fair to have Douglas be able to speak. Douglas, if you could give us your name and address and
yes. Can you
your
hear
thoughts?
me all right? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Douglas Burns. I'm at 1121-20 Scarcliffe Road. So I'm two lots to the east of the subject property, POB 1J0. So I had more of a comment or a question for the group.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I basically understand the application. I'm generally in support of it. I did have one concern and question though that worries me about the future. If this was to be approved, what would happen down the road if the lot or property was sold and the next owner said, I would like to keep my 935 square foot boathouse, and I'd like to demolish the bunkie and put up a 7,000 square foot cottage? What would be the implications in that scenario?
Mr. Sharp, could you answer that question for us?
Through you, Chair Bosworth. Thank you, Mr. Burns, for joining us and for your question. In this particular instance, nothing would prevent the owners or a future owner from demolishing the proposed dwelling and building a larger dwelling on the lot if this variance is approved. If this were a zoning bylaw amendment application, perhaps some restrictions could be included in the bylaw. given that it would run with the land, it would become applicable law under the Ontario Building Code. But I believe, given that a minor variance application is being proposed, I don't believe that there would be anything that we could do through this process to prevent that from happening. With that being said, any future dwelling on the lot, if it were to be larger, of course, would need to comply with all of today's present zoning bylaw requirements, including front yard setbacks, rear and side yard setbacks, lot coverage, maximum size, all of those types of considerations. I'd be happy to elaborate further if needed. Thank you.
Mr. Quinn.
Through the chair to Bryce, am I wrong in believing that if in the future, if they kept this as the dwelling where it sits and they wanted to change it, that under today's grandfathered rules, could they not probably reestablish or have an argument to build at 50 feet setback as opposed to 66 or 70?
Through you, Chair Bosworth. Thank you, Member Quinn, for your question. I don't believe that there would be any grandfathering rights associated with a dwelling on this property. So as you would note, the dwelling that's proposed is proposed in compliance with front yard setback requirements. So there would be no grandfathering. Any new additions would need to be set back at least 66 feet. Thank you.
But with the boathouse being the principal, I think there's an argument for the current owner to say that they could go to the grandfathering. It's nothing to do with what they're asking for the building today. If we switch the use of the boathouse, it would take any argument for a grandfathered setback to be applicable.
Mr. Sharp.
Through you, Chair Bosworth. It's an interesting question and one that I haven't put a whole lot of thought to. I guess my first reaction is that it may not be possible to apply the grandfathered front yard setbacks to a dwelling that's located over water to a new dwelling that would be located over land. With that being said, I think just getting back to what's proposed, I think that we need to remember in the context of Member Quinn's question that the boathouse is not intended to function as a dwelling. It's intended to function as a sleeping cabin. Thank you.
Any further questions from the members? I have one clarification for Mr. Sharp. If they were building the boathouse in exactly the same footprint, could it be grandfathered as a dwelling?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Bosworth. Yes, certainly it could. So they could replace exactly what's there today, and it could continue as a legal non-complying dwelling. And as Mr. Soya has noted, there's some fairly good or significant improvements occurring through this redevelopment proposal, which is partly why we've been able to lend our support. Thank you.
Well, okay, then no further comments. I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that application A-75/21 Mazan to recognize an as-built one-story dwelling and permit the construction of a two-story boathouse with a sleeping cabin in the upper level and an associated dock is hereby approved with the following variances being granted. 1, to permit a dwelling to have a gross floor area of 362 square feet. 2, to permit a sleeping cabin to be 935 square feet in floor area. 3, to permit the second story portion of a two-story boathouse with a lot fronting onto a Category 1 lake with 300 to 399 feet of lot frontage to be 935 square feet. And 4, to permit the second story portion of a two-story boathouse on a lot fronting onto a Category 1 lake with 300 to 399 feet of lot frontage to extend 39 feet from the high water mark. These variances granted as shown on the plan attached to the notice of decision. This approval shall remain in effect for 3 years from the date of decision. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Back to our chair.
Thank you very much, Member Waldensworth. And the next application is A 7621 Roach, and that is, I believe, Ms. Walker.
Thank you very much, Chair Edwards. The next application to be heard is minor variance application A-76/21 in the name of Roach. The subject property is known municipally as 1102 Ashford Drive, Unit 4. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted site plan starting on page 104 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicant proposes to construct a new single-story boathouse with a peaked roof and an associated dock, and redevelop an existing single-story boathouse with a rooftop sun deck and an associated dock. The proposed development will result in 10.8% lot coverage within 200 feet of the high water mark where 10% is permitted, and a cumulative dock width of 91 feet where 75 feet is permitted. Notice of this public hearing under the Planning Act was circulated 12 days in advance, and 11 submissions have been received to date. The first submission is by Tim Sopko, the Township's Public Works Technician. The Public Works Department has no comment. The second submission is by Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official. The Development Services Department has no objections. The third submission is a letter of objection by Elizabeth Harding and Frank Durakin, area property owners. The submission is summarized as follows. Our property is across the bay from Perry Roach's property, directly across from the new boathouse. We have been supportive of the past variance application on this property. However, we have concerns with the current proposal. The owner has had ample opportunity to design his property without the need for zoning relief, but has chosen not to. For instance, one less building could have been constructed, or the existing garage, could have been a 3 or 4 bay garage instead of a 5 bay garage, or the proposed boathouses could have been reduced in size. The applicant has the right of permission to have coverage up to 8,200 square feet, but does he really need further development or zoning relief? Concerns were also expressed over the time frame that the application notice was received. The fourth submission is a letter of objection by Michael Bateman, an area property owner. The letter is summarized as follows. My cottage is located across the bay from the narrowest point. My opposition is ongoing to this ongoing development is numerous, and I have listed the specific planning considerations below. 1, the relative amount of frontage is small, and the property is located on the narrowest part of the bay. 2, the site already has a significant impact on the waterfront. The site has a large cottage which does not meet current setbacks, a sleeping cabin, a 5-car garage, and a 2-car garage. All of these structures are visible from the nearby properties. The totality of the development on the site is excessive and not in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw. 3, permitting 2 boathouses and a separate dock is excessive and not in keeping with the surrounding properties. 4, the proposal would appear that to support the use of the property by multiple user groups at the same time. And 5, Dark Bay has unique environmental considerations, and they have concerns about how this will impact the environmental area. The fifth submission is a letter of objection by Leslie Kolbeck, an area property owner. The submission is summarized as follows. My wife and I concur completely with this preceding comments. Our property is located across the bay, and we are in full view of the current dock, proposed boathouse, and in partial view of the existing boathouse. The width and length of Dark Bay is too narrow to support building development that is proposed in this application. Attached is a drone photograph of Dark Bay from about 7 years ago, demonstrating the narrowness of the bay. I believe we have this available to screen share at committee's request. We have concerns about the safety of the boating and swimming. The applicant is looking for development of 5 boat slips. The increased watercraft activity will have a detrimental impact on water quality and the shoreline ecosystem. The sixth submission is a letter of rejection by Joelle and Tony Roach, area property owners. The submission is summarized as follows. My husband, Tony Roach, and I concur completely with preceding comments against Mr. Roach's application for a minor variance. Our property is located directly across the bay at the narrowest point. The seventh submission is a letter of objection by George and Rosemary Elliot, area property owners. The letter is summarized as follows. Mr. Roach has built a facility that is far beyond the character of the neighborhood and is quite frankly offensive. Cluttering the shoreline with more docks will result in our narrow bay converging into a suburban back alley. We have read our neighbor's arguments in this matter and are in agreement with all the comments. The eighth submission is a letter of objection by Rob Elliot, neighbor and property owner to the west. The submission is summarized as follows. We are not in a position to support the application given the absence of planning justification and respectfully disagree that the proposed amendments are minor in nature. The cumulative impact of the overall development concept is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood and is lending itself to the use of a multi-user compound rather than a traditional cottage and exceeds the neighborhood look and feel. Approval of this application would result in permitting site overdevelopment. The ninth submission is a letter by Steve and Cindy Mark, a neighboring property owner. We own property on Dark Bay next to the Roach property. We are not opposed to the building of any boathouses that meet current bylaw requirements. We are concerned any precedent that would be set should any variances be permitted in a building plan of a small restricted waterway like Dark Bay. The 10th submission is a letter of objection by Tyler Harris, an area property owner. The submission is as follows. We are across the bay from the Roach compound. Dark Bay is a wonderful small bay, and I believe it's everyone's responsibility to protect it from all and any forms of overdevelopment. I'm opposed to the minor variance and agree with the points expressed by Mr. Bateman, Mr. Elliott, and Mr. Colbeck. The 11th submission is a letter of objection by Bev McCannell, an area property owner. The submission is summarized as follows. I find the request for the variance impossible to condone due to the narrowness of the bay, environmental impacts to the shoreline and fish habitat, and the large amount of existing built form on the subject property. I can read any of the above submissions in full at the request of committee. Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration. Staff recommend that minor variance application A-76-21 Roach be approved subject to the following conditions. That the portion of the existing swim dock be removed as intended by the applicant. Staff have no further comments at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. Is the applicant or applicant's agent here wishing to speak on this?
The applicant.
Applicant, okay. Would you bring them in, please?
He's in.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, good morning,
address.
Chair. I am just trying to get my camera on here. There we are. Good morning, Chair Edwards and respected committee members. Happy New Year. My name is Perry Roach, owner of the subject property of 1102 Ashforth Drive, Unit 4. My mailing address is 140 Columbia Street West, Waterloo, N2L 3K8. Thank you, committee members, for taking this time to hear this variance, and thank you, Ms. Walker, for your presentation. Contributors to this proposal include myself, Mark Jones of Draft Tech and Gravenhurst, Foley Construction of Gravenhurst Surveys, Coot, Hiley, Jarmett, Bracebridge, and thank you for the many questions and answers. And there's been dozens back and forth to the planning team of Muskoka Lakes, especially since there's been so much discussion with my neighbors and the concerns. So the contributors and myself of this proposal, my variance, concur and understand this application is in good planning and it conforms to the official plan and complies with the zoning bylaws currently zoned and meets the 4 tests. I understand there's some sensitivity issues with my neighbors, and I've asked Foley Construction to submit a letter. It should be in the file, noted that they understand the very sensitive nature of the current size of the boat port that I've been trying to replace, which has been there for way before the property the neighbors' objections, purchase their cottage. And I'd like to take this opportunity and sincerely thank the Muskoka Lakes team for all their assistance and time spent working with me, and the contributors, especially during these COVID times. I respectfully request an approval for this application. I'm ready to answer any questions. I certainly didn't expect all these people to completely be against this, but I certainly have lots of answers and questions for everybody if whichever you'd like to move forward with.
Thank you very much. And I'll have to ask, is there anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this application? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application?
Yes.
Okay, could you start bringing them in, please?
There's one in, Michael Bateman.
Okay,
And I'll start to bring the rest in.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
yes, I can.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, all the objections to Mr. Roach's thing is basically every neighbor within the distance that was submitted, every single one of us have objected to it. It's not like some of us have, it's all. This is a very narrow bay, and anytime in their development, it reflects completely on the bay, and the overdevelopment really needs to be reined in, and we should need to follow you know, the vision of Muskoka Lakes. I feel this is outside of that, but I just think it's clear to understand that basically every neighbor has objected to this. Every neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this?
Yes.
Yes, okay, bring them in, please. Are they having trouble getting in?
There's two people in, Frank and Steve Marks. They're
Okay.
just not speaking.
If we could bring them in, that would be great.
I think they're in, Alan. You might just want to ask one or the two to.
Sorry?
They're both in.
Yeah.
You might just want to ask, maybe start with Frank and ask Frank to.
Okay, Frank, would you like to speak? You can turn your mic on and also your screen sharing video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I did not ask to speak. I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, you're fine. Okay. And the next person is
Steve Marks.
Steve Marks. Steve, would you like to speak?
No,
Steve,
I did not ask to speak.
You did not ask to speak? Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we give everyone their voice here, so we have to ask. Is there anyone else in the queue? Okay, and I will ask Mr. Roach if he'd like to say anything in rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Obviously, I'm not in any way trying to cause any problems in the bay. I just want to make some observations. I'm the fourth boathouse project in this bay over the last 12 to 24 months that have been completely approved. Frank Dorson is blocking is putting up one of the boathouses, and it could be construed as a challenge for them with the bay view. But my proposed application here is not blocking anybody's view whatsoever. And frankly, I'm concerned that everybody's, allowing the other neighbors in the bay putting up their boat ports or houses, and then all of a sudden denying me. Mr. Bateman respectively made some statements about every neighbor objecting, but I'd like to make one correction. And Caitlin may confirm this or not confirm this, but Mr. Mark, who is directly next door to one of the new boat ports, I had conversations with him, and he is not in direct, concerns with the boathouse, and he asked me to make some changes, and I respectfully made those accordingly. And this project is in good planning, and it does comply with all the bylaws. I wish I had team members on the planning team that were so thorough in the company I run, because there must, they are very maniacally thorough with what every, portion of this application has. I'd also like to point out that the current existing boat port was there prior to all the neighbors buying their cottages. I may be wrong about one of them, but since they moved in, that boathouse was there. And I'd also like to point out that it is of smaller footprint. I'd also like to point out that it is a small, narrow bay and used to be non-inhibitable by any cottages. They used to use it as a water ski bay. And then all of a sudden, at a very low price point, they started building cottages in that little bay. And I think when we all understand, when you buy something in that little bay, you're going to get docks and boathouses that go up, which, is the right and privilege, as long as the planning is correct and as long as the rules are followed, with every other cottager that pays their taxes and planning. And the cottagers had the ability to go out and buy 465 frontage feet of property, just like I had when they bought their cottages. And they didn't. They bought much smaller footprints, which restricts things. So I understand that. So I'm trying to really understand their concerns. I asked Foley's Construction, how can we absolutely make sure that we're not going to move the current boat port any further out? And what they said is, because I'm very concerned for my neighbors and sincerely care, they said they put these little markers on the corners of the current boathouse and then measure every time and make sure that the new boat port is no further out to the space that it currently exists for the last 40 some odd years. And really, I'm trying to improve the neighborhood, not take the neighborhood to a lower level. My existing boat port is over 40 years old, and it's starting to be very tired and concerned about the steel, being compromised over 40 years. There was some mention about fish and ecological issues. And as we know, steel docks have actually smaller footprints than docks that are made like a lot of my neighbors' docks are made with very large, pieces of timber underneath with rocks applied. They take up much more space for the fish and the ecological things than what I'm building. And, I truly believe that I meet the 4 tests officially following the plan, and in nature, this variance is a minor one. And I think it's in very good planning. So I respectfully would like to say to my neighbors, I understand your concerns. I tried my best to talk with them. My initial plan was to replace the boat port that's there with 2 other boat slips right across from Mr. Bateman. And he said he didn't want to look at it. I just don't want to look at it. I don't even want you to take your existing down. If you do, I'll fight you till the end, and I'll fight you to put up the new one. And I just, I sent a couple emails and made phone calls, and he wouldn't respond to me. So I've tried my best to talk to the neighbors and understand their concerns. The only one that really would talk to me was Mr. Mark, and we came to an agreement. So I respectfully request the approval of this. I understand if you're going to deny this, I'd like an adjournment, and try to work this out. But at the end of the day, honestly, I've already tried to work this out, and I think this is in good planning. And I apologize if I gone over my 5 minutes, Chairman Edwards, and I'm open for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Member Quinn first. He had a question. He had his hand up.
I don't believe I have my hand up. No.
Oh, it is up on the screen. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. Are there questions from any of the members then? Yes, Mr. Member Bosworth.
Well, as I am beholden to do normally, start this off. I don't think we've ever turned down an application for 0.8% over on coverage. On paper and in fact, and with respect to the bylaw, I believe this is minor, particularly if they move that extension off the dock. The dock width is a variance only because they haven't moved the dock to be perpendicular, which would be a worse situation. I'm very sympathetic to the neighbors, but I think the history of this bay speaks to significant development over time, and so I will be in support of this.
Any other comments from any other members? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll read the motion. Moved by Member Bosworth, second by Member Quinn. Be it resolved that application A 7621 Roach to permit the construction of a second one-story boathouse with a peak roof and associated dock is hereby approved, with the following variance being granted. 1, to permit a lot coverage of 8,861 square feet or 10.8% within the lot coverage 200 feet from the high water mark. 2, to permit the cumulative dock width of 91 feet. These variances are granted, shown on the plan attached to the notice of decision, is hereby subject to the following condition. 1, that a portion of the existing swim dock be removed as intended. This approval shall remain in effect for 3 years from the date of decision. Are there any questions, any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
And the next application is A 7721. And that would be Mr. Soy, I guess.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. The next application to be heard is minor variance application A 7721 in the name of Preston and Kunka. Subject lands are located at 1500 North Shore Road. I direct committee's attention to the submitted sketches starting on page 129 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of this application is summarized as follows. The applicants propose to construct a one-story dwelling addition, to construct sun decks, and to convert an existing one-story garage into a sleeping cabin. Relief is requested from the minimum lot frontage requirements of 100 feet. The subject property has 98 feet of frontage, and a variance of 2 feet is requested in order to permit the enlargement of an existing dwelling, new sun decks, and a new sleeping cabin on an undersized lot. On 3 Mile Lake, the maximum permitted lot coverage within 200 feet of the high water mark is 8%. In this case, the proposal would result in a lot coverage of 8.8% or 1,970 square feet, and a variance of 179 square feet is therefore requested. The minimum permitted side yard setback is 15 feet. However, in this case, the proposed dwelling addition with associated sun decks is to be 12 feet from the southeasterly interior side lot line, and a separate sun deck is to be 11 feet from the southeasterly side lot line. The requested variances are 3 feet and 4 feet respectively. The maximum permitted floor area for a sleeping cabin is 650 square feet. In this case, the existing garage, which is to be converted to a sleeping cabin, has a floor area of 679 square feet, and the requested variance is 29 square feet. Notice of this public hearing under the Planning Act was circulated 12 days in advance, and 2 submissions have been received to date. The first submission is by Tim Sopko, the Township's Public Works Technician. Public Works Department has no objections. Second submission is by Nick Snyder, the township's chief building official, advising that the Development Service Department has no objections and that a septic review will be required as a result of the increased habitable floor area of the cottage, in addition of the sleeping cabin. I prepared a detailed, Kristen prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration and recommends that the application be approved, subject to a site plan agreement being entered into along with securities for plantings and to implement as necessary enhanced protection policies of the District of Muskoka official plan with regards to 3 Mile Lake, and that the existing shed be removed as intended. Staff have no further comments at this time, but would be happy to answer questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawyer. Appreciate that. And I believe the applicant's agent is here to speak on this. Okay.
Coming in now.
Would you like to bring him in, please?
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Savas Veratis of Plan Muskoka. I'm here this morning representing the applicants as their agent and professional planner. I guess to start off, I'd like to say that I did thoroughly read the report prepared by staff. I think the way that staff has both verbally and in written form described this application is accurate. As you've heard, there's a few different variances that are required to permit or to implement the proposed development. So just to make it clear, what's being proposed is an addition to the back of the existing dwelling and a conversion of the garage from a garage to a sleeping cabin. There are some sort of related variances as a result of that. As you heard, the lot is undersized in terms of lot frontage to be a minimum to meet the minimum standards of a lot of record. That variance is 2 feet. Whenever I see old lots that are short at 98 feet rather than 100 feet, I'd like to think that the intention back to when this lot was created some time ago was to be 100 feet wide. Some modern surveying probably has come up with it that it falls a little bit short of that, but that is the variance is 2 feet. So this lot was 2 feet short of being able to accommodate additional development. The lot coverage increase being proposed is to 8.8%, which is 179 square feet, which is a fairly small number as well, if you look at it in the grand scheme of things. The side yard requirements, as you can see from the site plan, when the building is sort of askew to the water, and when you're adding to the back of it, it actually has the effect of bringing the building slightly closer to that side lot line. While 15 feet is normally required, the variances of 12 and 11 are pretty close, and there was no intention of actually bringing this building any closer to the side lot line. It just happens sort of naturally when you extend that building backwards. And finally, the conversion of the garage to a sleeping cabin. It's unfortunate that it came in 29 square feet over the 650 square foot maximum floor area. If you were to look at it, and a little bit closer, you can make the argument that the inside floor area is akin to being 650 square feet if you were to measure from the inside walls. But in this case, in the way that the bylaw measures floor area in this case is to the exterior walls. So based on the survey that the applicants had prepared, it came in at 679 square feet, and it's fortunately just a little bit larger than what the bylaw would normally require. And there's less of this variance being required. So when we look at this property sort of overall, there one good thing about the whole situation is that there was an old septic system that was placed fairly close to the water, which recently was decommissioned, removed, and a new septic system was installed much further from the water, which would have a good effect on the lake. And also it was sized appropriately to accommodate all the development on the property as well. So there's not going to be the need for an expansion to that septic system or a second septic system to implement this sleeping cabin and the addition to the back of the dwelling. In terms of the conditions that are being requested of staff to enter into a site plan agreement, the applicants have no problem doing that. And the shed being removed was always part of the plan as well. That sort of reduces the proposed coverage down to the 8.8%. They're in the process of purchasing their original shore road allowance as well as part of this application as well. So that's just something that's going on as well. So overall, I don't feel that the proposed development has a detrimental impact in terms of tipping the scales of built form and natural form on the subject lands. I feel that the variance for lot coverage is fairly minor. I think it can be accommodated, particularly as it's being added to the back of the existing dwelling. That dwelling is coming closer to the water, and unfortunately comes a little bit closer to side lot line, as I mentioned before, because of its orientation to the property lines. So I'd like to, I guess, turn it over to the committee for questions, but I'd be happy to answer if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this application?
No.
Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Okay, so seeing there's none, other questions from the members? Seeing none. Moved by member Quinn, second by member Bosworth. Be it resolved that application A 7721 Preston Kunkka to permit the construction of a one-story dwelling addition, sun decks, and a conversion of an existing one-story garage to a sleeping cabin is hereby approved following the following variances being granted. 1, to permit an enlargement of an existing dwelling, new sun decks, and new sleeping cabin on an undersized lot. 2, to permit a lot coverage of 1,970 square feet or 8.8% within the lot area 200 feet from the high water mark. 3, to permit a dwelling addition to be 12 feet at the closest point from the southeasterly interior lot line. 4, to permit a sun deck to be 11 feet from the southeasterly interior lot line. 5, to permit a sleeping cabin to be 679 square feet. These variances are granted as shown on the plan attached to the notice of decision and are subject to the following conditions. 1, that a site plan agreement be entered into along with securities for plantings and to implement as necessary enhanced protection policies of the District of Muskoka official plan. And 3, that existing sheds should be removed as intended. This approval shall remain in effect for 3 years from the date of decision. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Matters carried.
Thank you.
And I think now we'll take a 7-minute comfort break. See you in 7 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can we start everything up now? Are we back live?
We're back on.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And the next application is A 7921, and looks like Mr. Soy is going to look after that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. Next application to be heard is minor variance application A 7921, in the name of Carusi. Subject property is known municipally as 1121 Scarcliffe Road, Unit 16B. Direct committee's attention to the submitted site plans starting on page 151 of today's agenda package. Purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicants propose to construct a two-story boathouse, including an upper level covered area. Excuse me. Relief is requested from the maximum first story length requirement of 50 feet for the first story of a boathouse, with length being measured as the distance of projection from the high water mark out into the water. The proposed first story of the boathouse will have a length of 57 feet, and a variance of 7 feet is requested. Relief is also requested for the maximum permitted length of the second story portion of a two-story boathouse. The maximum permitted length is 35 feet. And in this case, the proposed second story boathouse will have a length of 54 feet from the high water mark. A variance of 19 feet is requested. Relief is also requested for the maximum size of the second story portion of a two-story boathouse. That maximum size being 650 square feet. The proposed second story will be 900 feet in size. The requested variance is to permit a 250 square foot covered area on a lot with less than 400 feet of frontage. Notice of this public hearing was circulated under the Planning Act 10 days in advance, and 3 submissions have been received to date. The first submission is by Tim Sopko, the Township's Public Works Technician. Public Works Department does not have any objections. The second submission is by Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official. The Development Services Department also has no objections. Third submission is by Bell Canada, advising that Bell has no objections. Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration and have recommended that if committee is considering approval of this minor variance, that of this application, that the variance from the maximum second story size requirement be defeated and that the application be adjourned so that the proposed second story boathouse length can be reduced. Staff have no further comments at this time, but would be happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawyer. And is the applicant or applicant's agent here wishing to speak?
Yeah.
Okay, would you bring them in, please?
Morning.
Good morning, Ms. Gibbs.
Thank you so much for taking your time this morning to hear our proposal. My name is Lisa Gibbs of the Permit Guy, 35 Covered Bridge Trail in Bracebridge, P1L1Y1. I'm here on behalf of the Carusi family and their proposal for the two-story boathouse. I think Mr. Sawyer already did a fantastic job summarizing the particulars of the project, the dimensions and all the setbacks. So I'm not going to reiterate and bore you with all that extra stuff. I'm just going to speak strictly to the design of the boathouse, why we designed it like this, why decisions were made, and how we ended up in need of this variance. I'm going to try to keep my portion short. The owner, Joseph Carusi, is also here and would like a few minutes to speak as well when I'm done. So I'll be quick. The process for the design of this boathouse began when the owners, Joseph and Norma, wanted to rebuild their existing boathouse to create a more functional and an updated space for them to share with their family. This is going to be their forever home, and they plan on spending many, many, many years here, enjoying the property, the lake, the boathouse, and whatnot. The first choice that we made was to relocate their existing boathouse to the east of where it currently sits. This was to allow for better access from the dwelling to the boathouse with the topography that exists on their property. However, we realized that this relocation was going to push them closer to their neighbors to the east, of whom we actually heard their application earlier today, interestingly enough. Anyhow, because we were going closer to the neighbors to the east, we wanted to create some increased privacy and noise separation from those neighbors. So that's where the design from the boathouse really began, was how we could design this to both serve Joseph and Norma's needs, but to create those extra separations from the neighbors to the east. In doing that, we created the living space on the right side, on the east side, and a small covered section to the rear and west of the property. The covered section itself serves a modest use, strictly for Joseph and Norma to use with their kids and grandkids as a protection from the elements and a little spot for them to gather. The living space itself, it did create an issue. We realized that the projection is an issue for you. The original design of the boathouse had the first story of the boathouse in compliance with the 50-foot projection, and the second story was going to project 12 feet past the allowable 35 feet. Unfortunately, during the construction of the dock, excessive bedrock was encountered, and the contractors decided to slightly relocate the dock, which worked great for the dock. The dock is now structurally sound and functional. However, it pushed our boathouse an additional 7 feet out into the water to try to get past that bedrock. So that brings us to where we are today. And now both levels are projecting a little bit farther than we had ever originally intended them to. While we totally understand, we completely understand that these are not insignificant amounts of projection. 19 feet is asking for a lot. However, this boathouse sits in a very small bay off of Lake Muskoka, and we really believe that visually and also with the passing by boaters, there's not going to be any obstruction to anyone else on the lake. It's significantly away from the navigation on Lake Muskoka. No one else is really going to see it except for their immediate neighbors, both of whom have seen the proposal and are in support of it. So just wanted to, that's basically how we came to the projection issues. I know that that is primarily what we're speaking about today. It was, like I said, partially unintentional, but also made to try to create a better space for the cruises, but also keeping in mind their neighbors to the east and trying to make it a comfortable space for both of them to enjoy. And that's it for me as far as design. I will stick around if there's any questions, but I will pass it over to Joseph to fill in any information I might have missed. So again, thank you.
Is the owner coming in now?
He's in, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Now, go ahead.
Hello, members. Thank you for taking time with me today. I really just want to reiterate a lot of the things that Lisa has brought up, that we, from the very beginning, tried to design our boathouse to have privacy and safety in mind. Privacy in that our neighbors on both sides can enjoy their families without the noise of ours and vice versa. And safety so that because we're in a small bay, that the waters on both sides of us are safe for all of our families all around. When we first started the process, I actually looked online at Muskoka Lakes and saw what the setbacks were to be, like, you know, the 45 feet from one side. And anyway, the one that I didn't see and didn't understand was the 35 feet for the upper portion. And obviously that's caused a problem. And we're hoping that you heard what Lisa has brought up in order to allow you to understand why we had to turn, which created the extra length. I'm hoping that with the support of my neighbors, both the Bensons and the Mazan family have said that they feel it's okay, that you might feel the same way. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
For the record, we have your full name and address and postal code, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Joseph Carusi, 1121 Scarcliffe Road, Unit 16B in Port Carling, POB 1JO.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this application? Anyone in opposition to this application?
No.
Seeing none, are there questions from the members? Yes, Member Grogan Green. You're still muted. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
In a lot of the cases today, when we've looked at second story boathouses, they've been grandfathered situations, whereas this one isn't. And I don't see the justification for the larger second story area. I understand the length problem that you had to push your boat, you know, the whole thing out. But in terms of the second story, I don't see a justification for allowing a larger building.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else on this? Member Quinn. You're still muted.
I think that variances here are very big. I support the staff in saying that there's you know, I think they need to, I think this needs to be deferred and they need to redraw the boathouse because it doesn't need to be 900 square feet. Whether, you know, whether the applicant didn't read the bylaws properly, I believe that his dock builders and construction or architectural people should have been looking at this and talking to him and warning him of the potential issue. So I would like to see this deferred, and I'd like to see it's going to be hard to move the lower level, and that's close to a 50% variance, but we don't need to do upstairs at close to a 40% variance.
Okay, thank you.
I won't support it the way it is.
Okay, so you would like it actually deferred. Mr. Bosworth?
I agree completely with Member Quinn. I don't see any reason why there should be 900 feet for this. I think they should stick to the 650 square feet and get it at the back of the building to keep it as close to the shore as possible and minimize that variance.
Okay, I'm going to ask the agent or the owner, would you like this deferred? Because it probably is going to be defeated if we vote on it today.
I thank you. Absolutely. We would like it deferred. If you're not going to approve it today, absolutely. We are open to a redesign from your comments. We hear you. We thought we took into consideration during the first draft what you guys would like, but yes, we can definitely hear you. We'll redesign and we will come back with something that's a little more palatable. As Member Quinn mentioned, I'll be not sure what's going to happen with the first floor. That still might be an issue because of bedrock issues, but I'm very happy to look at everything and bring you something that is more in compliance with what would make everyone happy here.
Okay, and I think Mr. Quinn and Mr. Bosworth, I'll go to Member Quinn first.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for that. And I think that's a good, I think that's what you should do. It looks like they might have a place to sit in the shade outside in by the fish cleaning station on the lower level. So I don't know where that extra roof line is required on the upper level.
Heard. I hear you. Thank you.
And yes, Member Bosworth.
Just as further guidance of when the applicant comes back, built form in this case is a concern for me. We're putting a large two-story boathouse and a very large building on the shore. with little or no, and they've got trees, but everything else has been cut down, and they better come back with some significant planting plans for the front of this building.
All right. Thank you very much. So on that, we'll defer this application. And thank you for input, everyone. And the next application is A8021, and Ms. Walker is going to look after that.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. The next application to be heard is minor variance application A-80/21 in the name of Kavusi. The subject property is known municipally as 3785 Highway 169, Unit 2. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted site plan and drawings on page 171 and to 177 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicants propose to construct a 2-story garage with a sleeping cabin in the upper level and an associated sun deck and stairs. Relief is requested from the maximum height of an accessory building of 20 feet. The proposed 2-story garage with a sleeping cabin is to be 24 feet in height. The variance requested is 4 feet. Notice of this public hearing under the Planning Act was circulated 13 days in advance, and 2 submissions have been received to date. The first submission is by Tim Sopko, the Township's Public Works Technician. The Public Works Department has no objections. The second submission is by Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official. The Development Services Department has no objections. Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration and have no concerns. Staff have no further comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. And is the applicant or applicant's agent here wishing to speak on this? I believe we do. Okay, would you bring Sabas in, please?
Good morning again, members of the committee. My name is Sabas Variances of Muskoka. I'm here again, just representing the applicants, the Kabusis, as their planner and agent on this matter. So I'll start by saying that I have read the staff report. I agree with the recommendation for the approval of this application that it meets the 4 tests of a minor variance. I think the recommendation was based on some key points that I'd like to just sort of go over before we turn it over to questions. One thing that really stood out to me when I was looking at this application to determine whether the 4 feet of height would be visually impacting or not is the actual current build out of the property. So currently the dwelling on the lands is about 180 feet from the shoreline, and it's tucked away behind some trees, and it's in very well hidden, very little impact in terms of visually when viewed from the lake at that distance back from the shoreline, with the vegetation in between it and the shoreline. And then when looking at the actual placement of the proposed 2-story garage, it's proposed to be even further from the lake, and it's placed about 250 feet from the shoreline itself. So in terms of visual impacts from the water, you can expect that you would not be able to see the structure whatsoever from the lake. In terms of impacting it's the neighbors on either side, it's actually very centrally sort of placed on the property. It's about 111 feet from the western side lot line and proposed to be about 70 feet from the eastern side lot line. So that is well over the side yard setback requirements for that zone. And it places it in an area of the property where it would be invisible to the neighbors on either side. And furthermore, just looking at it from the road perspective, it's placed about 82 feet from the road itself. So again, the placement of the building is such that the impact of the additional height on the lake and on abutting lands and passer buyers by vehicle would be minimal, if none, because the building itself would be probably likely unseen from any of those different vantage points. You would couple this also with the fact that the property is fairly large. It's very well vegetated, and the trees themselves that are in and around the area that are the proposed garage are very, very tall. So tall that they would definitely eclipse the height of the building that's being proposed as well, and serve as an excellent visual buffer. The lot coverage proposed on the property is only 3.6% for the area within the first 61 meters. And 2.3% for the property overall. So you can see it falls well under the normal maximum lot coverage permissions for a property such as this, showing that the amount of development being proposed is actually well under what the vision for the maximum development would be on a property. So when you look at all these things combined, I think it becomes fairly clear, at least to me, that the actual visual impacts and impacts of this variance would be very minimal on a property such as this when placing the building in a location of a property such as what's being proposed. And I think all those matters came into play when the staff were looking at it and myself were looking at it to try to come up with a determination whether this met the 4 tests of a minor variance. So I don't feel that the additional height is going to cause a situation where the property appears overdeveloped or that the proposed building would be visual impacting on anybody in the surrounding area. So that was the premise of my sort of review and my justification, and I think staff would agree with me on that one. So I'd be happy to answer any questions though that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this application?
No.
Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? No. Okay. Questions from the members? No questions? Seeing none, I'll read the motion. Moved by Member Quinn, second by Member Bosworth, be it resolved that application A8021 Divorce to permit the construction of a 2-story garage with a sleeping cabin in the upper level and an associated sun deck and stairs with the following variances being granted. 1, to permit a 2-story garage with a sleeping cabin in the upper level of to be 24 feet in height. This variance is granted as shown on the plan attached to the notice of decision. This approval shall remain in effect for 3 years from the date of decision. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the next application is A8020, no, sorry. Didn't check one off. A8121 Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. The next application to be heard is minor variance application A-81/20 in the name of Johnson. The subject property is known municipally as 1119 Skeleton Lake Road 2, Unit 4. I would direct committee's attention to this submitted site plan starting on page 196 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicant proposes to construct a dwelling addition within the required side yard and front yard setback. The proposed dwelling addition will be 0 feet from the westerly side lot line. The required exterior side yard setback is 30 feet and the required setback from an unopened road allowance is 25 feet. The proposed dwelling addition will also be 62 feet from the high water mark where 66 feet is required. The requested variance is 4 feet. Notice of this public hearing under the Planning Act was circulated 13 days in advance and 2 submissions have been received to date. The first submission is by Nick Snyder, the Township's chief building official. The Development Services Department has no objections. The second submission is by Tim Sopko, the Township's public works technician. The submission is as follows. Public Works does not support the relaxation of setbacks from a road allowance unless there is a compelling reason to do so, or if the application provides an improvement or betterment of an existing condition that is in the best interest of the township. Reduction in setbacks from the unopened road allowance can present future maintenance issues and an increased costs associated with tree maintenance. However, within the context of a renovation of the existing building within encroachments, where obtaining a proper setback may not be feasible, Public Works would consider the proposed development to be an improvement. Public Works is supportive of the application if the alternative is existing conditions of encroachment. Public Works also has concerns about the existing parking area on the road allowance, and staff has added a recommendation to, as a condition of approval to address this concern. Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration. Staff recommends that minor variance application A-81/21 Johnson be approved subject to the following conditions. 1, that the existing sun deck associated with the existing dwelling be removed as intended, and 2, that the encroachments of a driveway and parking area on the abutting unopened original road allowance be addressed to the satisfaction of the township as necessary. Staff have no further comments at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. And I believe we have an agent, and is the applicant an agent here or just the agent?
They're both here.
Okay, we'll bring them in, please.
Good
Good morning, Chairman Edward, members of the committee. John P. Gallagher and Associates, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H 1C9. And also following along is the owner of the property, Mr. Johnson. I think Caitlin has explained the application quite well. My client was looking to do some renovations on his small cottage on Skeleton Lake. And as a result of that, the first two variances are with respect to the existing encroachment that predates the zoning bylaw. So the first two variances would recognize a zero setback, and that pulls off the sun deck and part of the building off the municipal road allowance. And the official plan supports that type of approach in trying to recognize setbacks and correct encroachments. With respect to the addition at the front, it's basically a 5-foot by 22-foot addition. It is a 1-story cottage. The area is already cleared in that area. And there's a significant treed coniferous buffer along the shoreline, which my client has no intention of disturbing in this application. The comments with respect to the Public Works, they did not have an issue with the removal of the building. There is parking on this lot. There's 2 driveways. You couldn't just see the one on the east side of the lot, but there is parking on my client's land, so that shouldn't be an issue. The 2 conditions that have been imposed, my client has no objection to. Again, we feel the application meets the 4 tests of the minor variance. There's been no objections from neighbors on the application, and it's a small addition to the existing 1-story cottage. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any. If I can't answer them, then Mr. Johnson's also here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. And Mr. Johnson, would you like to comment?
All right. Sorry for the delay, Chair Edwards. Yes, I completely support the recommendation of Caitlin Walker. Just by way of background, this redevelopment has been forced on us through the failure of the west wall of this cottage. That was an addition that was added in 1980, and it is a portion of the building that encroaches on the road allowance. The wall has already been demolished and a temporary wall constructed to secure the interior of the building. So in fact, the encroachment doesn't exist as we speak. Our objectives in this redevelopment has fundamentally been to maintain the character of the building. It's a relatively small paneled cottage, and it has seasonal use. The reason why we'd like to do this is my family already owns cottages that are adjacent on either side to this building, and both of those are winterized buildings, and therefore in the winter, and anybody wants to go up north, they have a choice of 2 properties already. Our objectives in undertaking the redevelopment or the construction are to obviously deal with the failing addition, which is now being demolished. Secondly, to deal with the encroachment, which is dealt with. And thirdly, the building that's built in 1968, it actually has 7-foot walls, if you can imagine, and it is quite dark. One of our objectives is to add more light to the interior of the building. The portion of the building, the 1980 addition, which was in the front of the building and encroached on the road allowance, was basically entirely a glass structure. And that's one of the reasons why the supporting, it didn't have proper drainage off the roof. And it is the reason why the if you will, the post supporting structure rotted. We want to construct a properly constructed building with a roof over it on the front of the building. So we're actually moving that portion of the building from the side of the building, if you will, to the front that faces the water. So those are what our objectives are. And as I say, we support the recommendation of the planning department.
Thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated, Mr. Johnson. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support or opposition to this application? Seeing none. Other questions from the members? Seeing none. Moved by member Bosworth, second by member Grogan Green. Be it resolved that application A 8121 Johnson to permit the construction of a one-story dwelling addition off the front and westerly side of an existing dwelling to be hereby approved with the following variances being granted. 1, to permit a dwelling addition to be 0 feet at the closest point from the westerly exterior lot line abutting the unopened road allowance. 2, to permit a dwelling addition to be 62 feet at the closest point from the high water mark. These variances are granted as shown on the plan attached to the notice of decision and subject to the following conditions. 1, that the existing sun deck associated with the existing dwelling be removed as intended. 2, that the encroachments of the driveway and parking area on the abutting unopened original road allowance be addressed to the satisfaction of the township as necessary. This approval shall remain in effect for 3 years from the date of decision. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. I noticed, too, we can correct that on the original note allowance, the A is missing. And unfinished business is A0520, and that's Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. The next application to be heard is minor variance application A-05/20 in the name of Malish. The subject property is known municipally as 1585 Brackenrigg Road, Unit 14. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted site plan starting on page 209 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicant proposes to reconstruct and enlarge a single-story boathouse. The resulting boathouse width will be 28.5 feet in width, where 24 feet is permitted. This was deferred by committee back in March of 2020 for the applicants to reduce the length of the boathouse, and that has since taken place. A submission has been received by the neighbor, John Lugston, a neighboring property owner to the east. The submission is summarized as follows. Given revisions of this application over the past year, I submit the following perspectives for consideration. 1, while continuing to obstruct the lake view from our adjacent property, hence reducing its value, the current proposal is a significant improvement on the original. 2, the subject lot is small and narrow. The shoreline frontage benefits substantially from the lot line angle relative to the shoreline, since there is no overriding necessity, example, water depth, to extend the dock out to the bylaw maximum. The size of the proposed development is already very large for a lot this size. With a dock/boathouse perimeter of approximately 170 feet, exceeding the shoreline frontage, is this new development size not already getting into the realm of overdevelopment? While it is acceptable under the bylaws, it should further extend by approval of the proposed minor variance. And while objection to the intrusion is out of lake view, the bylaws as currently written. I therefore am sympathetic to the planning department's discretion and the bylaw rights of the applicant. I do question why the benefit would be granted if unnecessarily exceeding any bylaw allowances, regardless of how minor. In the larger context, approval through time of unnecessary minor variance applications represents a creeping override of the bylaws. At the end of the day, one has to ask, does this represent the majority of Muskoka, respect the majority of Muskoka landowners who do abide by the bylaws? Staff have prepared a detailed report for committee's consideration. Staff recommend that minor variance application A-05/20 Malish be approved. Staff have no further comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. And I believe that we have an agent and the applicant present.
Just Ryan.
Okay, just the agent then. Would you bring Mr. Allen in then, please?
Good morning, committee. My name is Ryan Allen. I'm a professional planning consultant representing the Siegel and Malish family. Address 104 Kimberley Ave, P1L 1Z8, Bracebridge, Ontario. My former colleague, Kelly Hodder, initially brought forward this application to this committee March 2020, so almost 2 years ago to date. There was some concerns raised by the neighboring property owner about the obstructing views, as well as the size of the requested variance, particularly related not necessarily to the width, but to the length of the boathouse. Staff had initially recommended approval of the application at that time, but the committee deferred the application to allow the Siegel Malish family to work out a potential solution with the neighbors. I can confirm that since the original meeting date in March, a meeting has been held, or multiple discussions have been held, and a revised plan has been put forward. The boathouse is 5 feet less in length. However, the actual boathouse location has been pulled back closer to the shoreline. So the original proposal had the furthest end of the boathouse almost at 50 feet in length, where the proposed revised plan that's attached to your agenda package is a much lesser length. However, the actual boathouse itself physically is 5 feet shorter in length. Be happy to answer any questions you have, and look forward to committee support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. And is there anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Seeing none, I'll go to the members. Are there any questions from the members? No questions? Okay. Moved by member Grogan Green, second by member Creaser. Be it resolved that application A0528 Malish to permit the construction and enlargement of a single-story boathouse is hereby approved with the following variances being granted. 1, to permit a single-story boathouse to be 28.5 feet in width. This variance is granted as shown on the plan attached to the notice of decision. This approval shall remain in effect for 3 years from the date of decision. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And I'd like to say, and that Mr. Allen, I guess you're still waiting for your new arrival, but good luck with it and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're patiently waiting any day now.
Good. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks. And we have some information. Are you going to do that? I'll just.
Thank you, Chair Edwards. The first information item relates to minor variance application A-66/20 in the name of Hogarth. The subject property is known municipally as 1063 Christie Point Road, unit number 7. Committee granted variances in April 2021 to permit the construction of a garage, resulting in a 10.4% lot coverage over the area of the entire lot, and 10.7 within the area of the lot 200 feet from the high water mark. These variances were granted subject to a condition requiring the removal of a shed. Committee's decision was then appealed by a neighbor. And I can inform you that after being informed by the applicant and the appellant that they had reached a settlement, the tribunal has dismissed the appeal and committee's decision stands. I have no further comments and be happy to provide any additional information if needed. The second information item relates to minor variance application A-70/21 in the name of McBain. The subject property is known as 1038 Elkey Point Road. Committee granted variances in December 2021 to permit the construction of a breezeway and carport with an attached storage room, an upper level storage loft, and a landing and stairs, resulting in 8.6% lot coverage over the area of the entire lot and reduced setbacks from my interior side lot line. These variances were granted subject to conditions requiring the removal of a steel framed boat canopy and a site plan agreement and securities for plantings. I can note that committee's decision has been appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal by the immediate neighbor who spoke in opposition to the application. I have no further comments, and again, I'd be happy to assist committee with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. And that, Mr. Quinn. Oh, you're still muted.
When the neighbor appeals it at this level and after we've supported it, they go the costs alone for lawyer and planning fees. It's nothing, no onus on the township to support this. I just want some clarification.
Mr. Sharp, can you answer that?
Chair Edwards. Yes, I believe that would be the case in this particular instance. Thank you.
Okay.
Member Grogan Green.
Yes, am I muted or unmuted?
No, we can hear you.
I just wanted to say, I remember this application and the side yard setback, and I do hope that the neighbor hires a planner to assist them at the tribunal, and maybe legal counsel as well, as Member Quinn referenced.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Moved by Member Quinn, second by Member Bosworth. Be it resolved, the meeting adjourned at 11:11. All those in favor? Thank you very much. I will just say, Rachel, you picked a good day not to come to work with the snow out there. Lucky you.
Toronto's a mess.
You can't believe Toronto.
Nope.
I think we got